Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching.
And this is Chuck Wolf, and you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. Delighted to be here again with you, and I've got a couple of guests coming on today that you should find extremely interesting. My first guest is going to be a fellow named Lenzy Wallace, Dr. Lenzy Wallace, who's been a friend for a number of years, long time now, and we're going to talk a little bit about his life story and a book that he wrote, From No to On. How do you turn no? How do you turn no, you can't do that, to something that you can do? How do you make something, how do you make other people's defeatist expectations just turn around and become something that you show people about what you really are capable of when people doubt you. A really interesting show about someone who really took the wheel and control how he felt for a lot of years, from a very young person all the way through to his 90th birthday, which is this month. So I'm really delighted to have a good friend and a colleague, Lenzy Wallace, coming up in a few minutes. Also, I'm going to talk with Andrew, one of the volunteers here at PKN, who's going to talk about his new program on the fourth Wednesday of the month. It's going to be dedicated to the LGBT community, and we're going to have him tell you a little bit about his show, what he's going to be doing, and what you can look forward to at the end of April, on the last Wednesday of the month. So that's all kind of exciting. In the meantime, I want to continue to talk about the Emotion Roadmap and take the wheel and control how you feel. And I know I had a caller from last week who wanted to call in, and if you've got a minute and you want to give me a call now, this is the number, 203-336-9756. If you don't get to call at this right away, you can call me probably around 12:30. I'll have about 10-15 minutes then, too, to talk to callers. This show is about helping the community understand what's possible around emotional control, around emotion management for yourself and for others. It's all about helping you understand how much more power each of you has in controlling your own emotions and in influencing the emotions of others. So people will often call in about situations at work. How do you influence a manager? How do you influence someone that works for you or with you? What happens when you have a disagreement with someone at work? How do you overcome the uncomfortable feeling of being around that person when you've just disagreed about something important? What happens when one person wins and another seems to lose? How do you turn that around? So anyway, there's lots of things that you might want to call and talk about that have to do with emotions that are happening inside of you or in someone else that you're dealing with. The other thing people call about a lot is relationship issues at home, with loved ones often, in fact. Sometimes they're with people who are not necessarily loved ones. You might have an issue with a neighbor, or with somebody in a community or a church or a synagogue or mosque, or something that is outside of work, but nevertheless involves strong emotions and is causing you some concern, some doubt. And you've heard me say this before, if you're a regular listener to the show, that when smart people are stuck, it's almost always, in my experience, because something emotional is happening either inside them or with someone else that they're dealing with. And while they may be an excellent critical thinker or a really good problem solver, when they're stuck, it's because there are emotions in play, and they're worried that the emotional situation might escalate, something that's people are a little mad about might turn to rage. Something where people are distrusting might feel like betrayal at some point. In any case, when emotions are in play, we don't have a lot of education and a lot of experience thinking just about the emotional aspects of whatever situation we find ourselves in. And that's what this show's about, is to help you feel like you're in charge, that you can take the wheel and control how you feel. And I'm Chuck Wolf, and this is the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. The Emotion Roadmap is something that I conceived a long time ago, working with Peter Salve, the president of Yale University, Jack Mayer, the University of New Hampshire psychology professor, who, together with Peter and Jack, created what they call the Mayer-Salve Emotional Intelligence Model. It's an ability-based model. It's really interesting. Let me see. So, in any case, this situation that in terms of the experience of having someone who you're working with, dealing with, trying to get along with, that isn't necessarily somebody that you feel like you can actually deal with successfully because of what's going on in your own mind, because of the way you're feeling about things. In your own mind, the way you're feeling about things, then it's difficult at times to know what to do when emotions are in play that you're not comfortable dealing with. And so what emotions might those be? What emotions might those be? So, what emotions might those be? Well, one of those things that you might think about is that you might have something going on in your life that is making you angry, and you may not be comfortable with anger. You might have something going on in your life that's causing you to be sad, and you might not be comfortable with sadness. You might have something going on in your life that's embarrassing, and you may not be comfortable with embarrassment. What emotions cause you some concern and often cause you to kind of like sit back and wonder, what should I do next? How do I handle being embarrassed, making a mistake? How do I deal with being really, really sad? And you know, sadness often comes from a loss, but hey, you know, the loss happened a while back, and for most people, they would be over it by now. Why aren't I? Or anger. I'm afraid of my anger. I'm afraid of exploding. I grew up in a house with an alcoholic, and he or she or they just exploded whenever they got angry, and that scares me, and I'm afraid of anger, and I don't deal well with anger. Or whatever it might be. Trying to get some control of your emotions has a lot to do with understanding that you can control them by planning emotionally what you want to feel instead of what you are feeling. By thinking about, hey, what I'm feeling isn't helpful. What would be better to feel? In fact, what would even be more ideal to feel? How do we create that? How do we do it? We're going to be talking to someone in just a minute or two who has been a friend for a long time, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about what caused him to be able to turn around, to turn no into on, to turn feelings of self-doubt and insecurity into feelings of confidence, to change life circumstances in an extremely positive way. Time and time again, not just once, but many times. What causes someone to be able to do that and others not to be able to do it so well? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm really looking forward to the phone call, and I hope you enjoy the show. My show is on the first and second Wednesday of each month. It's part of WPKN's Community Strip. And you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, serving Fairfield, New Haven, and Litchfield counties in Connecticut and Suffolk County in New York, as well as communities around the world. We are now available via podcast, and we are streaming at WPKN.org. In fact, if you like the show a lot, you can go to SoundCloud as well as iTunes and Stitcher. I'm a big SoundCloud fan. And you can go on SoundCloud and you can look up WPKN, or you can look up Emotion Roadmap with Chuck Wolf, and you can listen to past shows. Some of the shows that I've had on have been really, really well received. One of the most popular ones is helping a Scottish woman who felt her heritage was in part the reason that she had trouble with anger. And it's an interesting conversation, and it ends really well with her finding a way to manage her anger that's delightful to her and to me as well. It's always delightful for me when I'm able to help somebody. In any case, as I was mentioning, I've got someone calling in just a few moments, and hope to hear from him soon. That would be Lenzy Wallace, Dr. Lenzy Wallace. Now, we are at WPKN, and you are listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel, and Control How You Feel. And this is Chuck Wolf. And while we're waiting, I'll talk a little bit more about the Emotion Roadmap. So the Emotion Roadmap is about this idea that you can control what you're feeling. Now, when would you want to control how you feel? Well, we got Lenzy. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Is this Lenzy?
Hey, Lenzy Wallace, how are you doing?
Oh, good, Lenzy. Thanks. Thank you for calling in, Lenzy. I did say a little bit about you. I'll talk a little bit more about you for a moment, and then we'll get rolling with the interview. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Well, you're on the air, so just so you know.
Okay.
All right. So Lenzy is somebody that I met. Lenzy was 60 years old, and I was 40, and I was working as the Director of Leadership Development at Hartford Insurance. And Lenzy was a person who had come in, who was recommended by a friend of his, because I had a position to fill. Now, I was meeting this 60-year-old man who had never worked in business or industry, and I had only recently been in business and industry myself, so I was wondering, why am I meeting with Lenzy Wallace? But he was a friend of a colleague, so I said, okay, sure, I'll have the interview. And I really wasn't expecting a whole lot to happen in the interview. I think we'd set aside about, I don't know, anywhere from a half hour to an hour, but I really didn't expect to go more than 30 minutes.
I lost him.
Oh, no, I'm here. Lenzy, are you there?
I pressed talk and I turned it off.
Oh my God, call right quick.
Okay, you do it.
Okay, yeah, actually you're on, but yeah, I guess you don't know that. You must have pressed something. Can you hear me, Lenzy?
Oh, wait a minute.
Hello? Nope. Okay. All right, we'll try. I guess they're going to try it again. All right. Well, that sometimes happens when you're 90, I guess. Anyway, so Lenzy will be calling in a moment. Here it is now. Hi, Lenzy. You actually didn't lose me. I could hear you.
Oh, okay.
All right. So anyway, I was saying I had met you when you were 60 years old, and I was 40, I think, because we were about 20 years apart. And in meeting you, I didn't really expect much to happen. And then our conversation, instead of going for about 30 minutes, which is what I expected, went on for about an hour and a half. And I wanted it to go longer because I so enjoyed meeting you and talking with you. And I just to let, I mean, you know how I feel about you already, but other people don't know. I think you're one of the finest, kindest human beings I've run across on the planet, and I'm just so thrilled that you and I got to know each other and work together for a few years, because I ended up hiring you, and we did some great work together, including working with executives, which was new for you, but you kind of just fell into it without missing a step, and you managed to overcome anybody's expectation that, why is this guy who's never worked in industry going to be able to teach me something? But you have so much about you that's about being a human being, being a humanitarian, that when we're talking about teaching people how to relate to others and to create followership and to be an effective leader, so much of just who you are, I thought, came across to the people that you and I got to work with and the others in our department. So anyway, it was a wonderful experience for me. And then from what I understood from talking to you prior to this phone call, was you and your lovely wife, Adrienne, were talking about, in the past you wished you knew more about what your own dad life experiences had been, and I guess you brought it up a few times, and she said, well, you know what, your children, Lenzy, don't know what your life experiences have been, and you've had so many amazing, wonderful, successful experiences that came out of some really tough circumstances, that why don't you create a book of some kind that kind of documents these things over time, and so that your kids will have that available, and they can read about that. And so I guess you got thinking about it, and you thought it was a good idea, and so somewhere in your late 80s, I guess, you started to think, okay, I'm going to write a book now, and that's one of the things that you've done. But if you want to talk a little bit more, Lenzy, just about why you wrote the book and why you titled the book what you did, and why it was an important message, not really just for your children, but for so many people who face daunting circumstances and challenges that they feel like they just have no chance to overcome. And you faced things like that all your life and overcame so many. If you could talk a little bit about why you wrote the book. Let's start there.
Well, basically, I never knew very much about my father. My father came up from Georgia in 1917 at 17 years old, which means he had to escape because, as you know, Jim Crow during those times in the South was very, very, very much in vogue, and he was risking his life to actually leave. And if you tried to escape, that's what you could be hung, you could be killed, you could be whatever. And so, but he never would talk about why he had what he went into, what happened to him down in the South, and so forth and so forth. So when he arrived in New England at 17 years old, he was an illiterate individual, and he was that way most of his life. And so my wife I kept saying to me, I wonder how my father got here. And I mentioned that so many times that finally Adrian said, well, why don't you talk about, write your own book about yourself. Your kids don't know what you went through to get to where you did, to have 3 successful careers, starting off as a music education person, and then going into the corporate world, and then going back into the academic world. And you were successful in all 3 of those. So don't you think your students, your family, your children need to know what you had to go through? So that's what was the catalyst for the book. It was originally written for my children, my adult children, that is. And the first person who edited it said, no, you need to let this be just about what you've said earlier, that it needs to be for the public. A lot of people need to see the book. So that's where we are, and that's why I wrote it.
Well, one of the things, Lenzy, that I didn't mention it, but people, when you're talking about Jim Crow laws, it occurred to me that people don't know that you're an African American, and that your father escaped from, a time, obviously when it wasn't that long after slavery had ended, really, and when he was being born and raised, and then you, as a 90-year-old, experienced some. We think of racism still alive and present today, but not necessarily in the form that it was when you were growing up. There was so much more of it then, and some of what I read in the book was some of the stories that you experienced. And I think as a Caucasian person, you think you sort of know about what black people's experience might be, but boy, just to read about it, it really it's kind of eye-opening to think about. Well, what was it like back then when you were first growing up? It was really quite different. And then you kind of have an interesting backdrop to the story, because you start off with a sort of interesting story feature, which is you put yourself in World War II on a ship in the Pacific, and you're kind of thinking about your life back and forth between being on that ship and some of the amazing experiences you've had over your lifetime. And there's an actual I don't know if you've seen it. But there's a television show that's following a similar kind of format in some ways, called This Is Us. Do you know the show?
No, I'm not.
It's a show about a family that has an experience of. It starts off where you see a mother and a father who just had triplets. Only one of the babies dies. Mm-hmm. And it's a white couple, and they end up adopting a third baby that was left at the doorstep of a fire station, I guess. And that third child is an African American baby, and all of them grow up together, and you see their stories as they're being raised as children. But then you also see the adult children. And it goes back. It kind of your book sort of reminded me of that kind of concept of going back and forth from different times in your life and seeing you as a young person at 17, and then knowing you obviously when we worked together, but also reading about some of the other experiences you had in your life. And so I thought the story, the way you wrote the book, was really it was a way of capturing people's interest, and it really, instead of just reading about anybody's life, it was a wonderful way. I thought you did a wonderful job telling the story.
Well, thank you very much. Basically, I followed what my wife's advice. She said to me, find some way to make it interesting so that you can capture people's interest at the very beginning of the story, and they'll want to follow through it and see what other kinds of things that you went through. So that's what I tried to do. I tried to make it at the very front some of the things that were very interesting and move back and forth. And being on the ship allowed me that liberty of and as an electrician down in the hold of the ship, watching and making sure the generators that powered the ships stayed on, didn't grab the electricity from one to the other and that kind of thing. So that was my job at that particular point in time.
And you tell it, I mean, it's also a very kind of gripping story, because it isn't just being on the ship, but you're in the middle of a huge storm in the ocean, and there's lots of things happening at the, going back and forth between, gee, what happens next in that part, and then all of a sudden we're learning something else about your life in another time period. So I think it was kind of a fascinating way that you drew people's attention to the different parts of your story. But then something that you told me many years ago too shows up, which is this idea that you were being told as a young person that you didn't really have much chance at success at life, and then you had some people in your life really influence you, and then you saw a poem, and somebody introduced a poem to you that became a powerful driver in your life. You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, that actually poem goes back to when I was in the junior high school. And I'd taken a subject, a course, that was supposed to be a Latin. I think it was Latin. And I flunked the course. And so what happened, the teacher who was teaching the course said, you people can't do a foreign language. Emphasis on you people.
Right.
Can't do a foreign language. And that stuck in my head. I mean, how do you tell a seventh grader, a young kid, those kinds of things? And I vowed that if ever I got the chance to do work as a teacher, I would never tell a student that they couldn't do this. I might have, if I had doubts, I would say, give it a shot, give it your best shot. And just so happened that it was another teacher that happened to overhear that conversation about you people can't do foreign language. And she called me into her office. She said, she put this poem down on my on her desk. She said, I want you to take this poem, and I want you to take it and memorize it. And I did. And would you want to hear a little bit of it?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. Somebody said that it couldn't be done, but he with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. So he buckled right in with a trace of a grin on his face. If he worried, he hit it. He started to sing as he tackled that thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. Somebody scoffed, oh, you'll never do that. At least no one has ever done it. But he took off his coat, and he took off his hat. And the first thing we know, he had begun it. With a lift of his chin and a bit of a grin, without any doubt or quit it, he started to sing as he tackled a thing that couldn't be done, and he did. There are thousands to tell you it cannot be done. There are thousands to prophesy failure. There are thousands to point out to you one by one the dangers that wait to assail you. But just buckle in with a bit of a grin. Just take off your coat and go to it. Start to sing as you tackle the thing that cannot be done, and you will do it.
That's great. That's great. And that's been kind of just a guiding force, I think. Sometimes I talk to people about having a vision for their life, and that's sort of been yours, it seems, Lenzy. Does that sound right?
It has been. In fact, even when I was when I started teaching school, first as a music educator in the public school system, anytime my band members, I would say, we can't play this, it's too hard, because I always would give them music that was challenging, that would challenge them to go further than they thought they could. And so about the 25th time they would hear that poem, when they told me that they couldn't do it, they said, okay, we'll go ahead and do it. And I did that poem with students in elementary school, junior high school, college, even college professors when I was an associate dean for a school of business in South Carolina. And I needed those professors to come together to get an accreditation that the school was trying to get. I would use that poem on them as well. They would say, well, we can't do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So that poem has really been the focal point of just about everything that I've done up to this point in time.
Well, we can't talk about the whole book, Lenzy, but there were a few moments in the book I did want to just chat a bit about so people get a sense of it. And at the end, we're going to talk. Well, why don't we tell people now? If they want to get the book is available. How would they get the book, Lenzy? How would somebody get the book? We'll mention it twice.
They could see me. They could contact me on Gmail, and the Gmail is Lenzy Book, one word, Lenzy, and Lenzy is spelled L-E-N like in Nancy, Z like in zebra, Y like in yes, book.com lenzybook@gmail.com.
Okay, Lenzy book BOOK
That's correct.
Okay, great. And that's how. And if they want to order the book, what's the book cost, Lenzy?
The book's going to cost $25.
$25. Okay, and the book is. And what's the book's title?
The book's title is From No to On: A Story of Resilience, and Victory Over the Odds.
Okay, and it's about Lenzy Wallace and Dr. Lenzy Wallace. Because Lenzy, you also not only went to got your bachelor's degree, but you ended up getting your doctorate. So from being told that you people couldn't do whatever you couldn't do, all of a sudden you're doing quite a bit. And I remember one of the stories in the book that I thought was so powerful was that once you had graduated, you wanted to be a band leader in a school system, and one of the schools you went to had turned you down. And then, could you sort of tell the story about being turned down one time by the school system and then having some really wonderful experiences somewhere else and then being asked again by that same school system if you'd come work for them?
Right. When I first graduated from the Hart School of Music in Connecticut, I'd asked the superintendent of schools in Hartford, for the music department that is, they had a job opening and I applied for it. And he told me, no, you have to have at least 3 years of experience in order to come to work in the Hartford school system as a music educator. Then he turns around and hires a woman from my class right into the same job that I had asked for. Fast forward.
Oh, wait, I want to just point out that woman had no experience either, right?
Exactly.
Right, okay.
The same amount of experience that I did, which was none at that point except for the education that we had gotten and graduated from.
Right.
And so then what happened after that was I worked under a very close friend of mine, Samuel Goldfarb, and we developed probably one of the best high school band programs in the state of Connecticut at that particular time. And we came back, I took my band into adjudications where they have these festivals where you can bring your groups in to be judged by people on the merits of their performance and that kind of thing. And so when we took our band in, we had to leave our bookcases in the cafeteria. And as we sat there, there was a group next to us that had 9th grade students, and we only had 7th and 8th grade students. And they started teasing my kids. Oh, you can't even hold that instrument. Look at them. And they were giving my kids a hard time. My kids came to me and they were saying, these people are really on our case. I said, just do not let them discourage you. You know what you can do. I said, take your revenge from the stage. So we got on stage. We did a couple of things for warm up, and got a little. Oh boy, they can hold their instrument. They can play a scale. We did our first song was very much of a rah-rah type of piece, boom, 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 that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
And the crowd was. I turned around, and the crowd, there wasn't a sound in the audience. We played our performance, and instead of walking after we'd finished, we got a standing ovation from the crowd. And when I told the kids, we're going to, instead of walking off backstage like they told us to, we're going to walk through the audience. So I took my kids through the audience, and they were very, very proud of what they had done. And so it was really, and it was the same individual who came running back into the same individual who had told me 3 years ago that
you couldn't work for the Hartford, right, or the Hartford school system.
This was in the Hartford school system,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah. He was in the Hartford school system. I was, and then when I brought the band back, I was from Vernon, which outside of Hartford. And so he comes running, this individual who refused me before and who told me you needed to have experience. He came running in and said, "How did you make a junior high school band sound that good?" And I said, "Working hard, working hard, working hard." And then he got a thing over his face, and I could tell that he was about to ask me if. And he did ask me. He said, "Are you happy where you are?" And I said, "I am extremely happy where I am." And I looked him dead in the eye when I said that, and I think he knew exactly what I was telling him without having to say it.
He remembered that he had said to you that you couldn't work for him several years ago, right?
Exactly.
Right. That was such a rousing story. I mean, I was reading it, and you know, when you see an injustice, when somebody did what they did, where they said you have to have 3 years of experience, and then all of a sudden they hire somebody right after you who has no experience either, and you feel like that's an injustice, and you're angry about it, and you want to prove somebody wrong, and then being able to prove them wrong by doing such a wonderful. What you did was so wonderful with the young kids in the junior high school band, and to come back and to be one of the top bands performing in that group. I guess there was a number of other bands performing, right, Lenzy, at at the same place?
Bands from all over Connecticut were there, and we came out as a top band.
That was such a great story. That's I appreciate you telling it on the air. I think people, if you're interested, I think you'll enjoy reading the book as well. I loved reading about it in the story.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, many of my students who were in that band are now in their 50s and 60s, believe it or not, and they have contacted me on Facebook, and some of the accolades that they have given me, it's been very humbling to hear their responses, and when they found me on Facebook and began to talk about the times that we had and how I inspired them, not only from a musical standpoint, but from life, how to live life effectively and that kind of thing. And so, you know, you often wonder to yourself, what did you do? And the fact that these grown-up adults now come back and tell me that I helped them to have a better life. That's kind of heartwarming.
Oh, it sure is. And you know, the show's called The Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And along with wanting to have you on because you've been a good friend for a lot of years, and I wanted to help to promote your book. But I mean, you really have controlled how you feel from a very early age, where people in many cases did not give you credit or did not see you as someone with possibilities, with potential, and you over and over again showed up on the scene and made a big difference in people's lives and in many different ways. And including when you work with me. So you want to talk a little bit about, I mean, I know what my end of it was when I first met you, but you were walking into a situation and in the corporate, coming to the corporate world. What made you think you could do that after not having had really any experiences in working in business or industry?
Somebody said it couldn't be done, but he was a chuckle reply. Maybe it could, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. I actually Particularly, I enjoyed working with you, as we have talked about. And the one thing that really stands out in my mind about working with you is we were doing a class, a group of I think they were mostly executives in the class, of this particular class we were doing. And I remember you saying, you know, the thing I like about Lenzy's quote from you now, the thing I like about Lenzy is that he can do everything that's on his resume. I have never forgotten that. That has been one of the finest things that anybody's ever said to me. It's just been just a fantastic thing. But I think also the fact that people put obstacles in my way, and I had to find ways of going around them, over them, under them, whatever I had to do in order to accomplish what I felt that needed to be done at a particular time in my life. I think this has probably been the reason why I've had so many calls and Facebook people who have got online and made so many very great compliments about how positively affected their life, not just the music, but affected their lives. And that makes me feel very humble.
I remember, Lenzy, when you and I, one of the things that distinctly stands out is that we used to co-facilitate or co-teach the course called Managing Relationships at Work. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you've been incredibly successful with is managing relationships in your life. And it was kind of like sort of a natural, while you didn't have the business experience per se, you did have the experience of lots of different relationships. And what happens in business is that people often are faced with challenging production goals, challenging initiatives, challenging projects that often look like, hey, I wonder if I can really get this done. And your willingness to talk about the poem, talk about your own life, to kind of be a role model for don't think something's impossible until you try it.
Exactly.
Keep going after challenges and believing in yourself, and you're gonna be able to accomplish quite a bit more than maybe you thought.
Right. And by the way, that poem was written by a fellow by the name of Edgar, spelled Edgar, Guest, Guest, and it was back in, I think, in the 1930s that he wrote that poem, just in time for me to be able to use it. So,
I was just going to say, it must have been you you must have seen it right after it was written. Yeah, that's funny. Now when after you worked with me one of the things that we did together was we started to kind of leverage some of the other experiences. Actually, I had worked in schools too. My earliest career was I was elementary school counselor, and I was actually the state of Iowa's first elementary school counselor, and then I was a junior high school counselor in a couple places. And so when you and I were working together with the corporation, they began to think about doing some outreach and into the community. And we began to look at how can we work with executives and groups of executives and helping them to take some ownership of the Hartford schools. So you actually ended up doing some good work for the Hartford school system, even if it wasn't in the music area. Because we ended up doing some volunteer work as Hartford employees, and then you did some more of that when you went into the claims world after you and I had weren't working together anymore, and then you took this program too, and I think you also took it back with you to South Carolina and to some of the academic work, I think.
Yep, all of that above, and but it all started with you, Chuck, because you gave me an incredible opportunity at age 60 to begin to do some of those things, and you're absolutely correct. I remember when we started importing people from the school system, starting off with the superintendent of schools at that particular time. I think it was the first group of teachers from the Hartford school system that we had, and then in the was it the I'm losing my train of thought here for just a second. Claim department.
Right.
That was I was able to help them to think more about who's in the pipeline to become promoted. In other words, do we get more people from different walks of life into the pipeline, and what do they need to do in order to move up? So that's kind of what we did with
when you got into the claims department.
Right.
Yeah. So then you left and you went down to the Carolinas, and you were I think you were doing some work with a church group too, if I'm not mistaken. That was part of it too, I think.
Yeah. Well, in between times, I did some work with church groups and that kind of thing. And but the main reason I was in the South was to work with a school that was trying to get an accreditation, the business school that was trying to get an accreditation. And it took a while because, academics, professors tend to be in their own silos, and they tend to not want you to see what they're writing or do what they're doing. So they become independent people rather than coming together. And one of the things that, because of what I learned through you and the Hartford, how to bring people together, was to get them to come out of their silos. If they were going to get an accreditation for the school as a whole, they needed to work together as a body of one and begin to trust each other, that I'm not going to steal from you and steal your thoughts and things of that nature. So they began. We started by I used some of the same stuff that we used in the corporate world, some of the management relationships at work type things that we did. And in 3 years, we got the accreditation that they were shooting for. But then we came back to Connecticut and started off in a different direction.
Well, Lenzy, one of the things that I wanted to do was to give you a chance to tell people a little bit about some of the experiences that they can read about in the book, because the story is a great story. And, you know, even if for some of you that may have people in your lives that are being challenged, I'm just talking to all the listeners who are listening today, and you're listening, by the way, to WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport. And this is the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. And I'm Chuck Wolf, and we're talking with Dr. Lenzy Wallace about the book that he wrote, From No to On. And it's a book that you can purchase, maybe not even just for yourself, but maybe there's someone in your life that you'd like to have a chance to read about, somebody who went out and did what no one thought he could do. And if you could, Lenzy, I'm going to ask you in a minute just to repeat the poem one more time in case somebody was just tuning in. But also, I just want to repeat how people can get that book. If you're interested in getting the book, you can contact Lenzy. The book is $25. You're right to email Lenzy, LENZY book, BOOK at gmail.com. Is that right?
Let me spell that again. LEN like N like in Nancy, Z like in zebra, Y like in yes, book. LENZY book.com.
Oh, no, not .com. Lenzy book at gmail.com.
Gmail.com. Sorry.
Right. That's okay.
Gmail.
And then if you would you mind just reading the poem one more time, and then we'll close it out.
Okay. Do you want me to read the whole thing? There are actually 3 stanzas, or do you just?
Probably what you read before is great.
Okay. Somebody said that it couldn't be done, but he or she with a chuckle replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried. So she buckled right in with a trace of a grin on her face. If he worried, she hit it. He started to sing as he tackled that thing that couldn't be done, and he did it. Somebody scoffed, "Oh, you'll never do that. At least no one has ever done it." But he took off his coat and he took off his hat, and the first thing you know, he'd begun it. With a lift of her chin and a bit of a grin, without any doubt or quit it, she started to sing as she tackled the thing that couldn't be done, and she did it. There are thousands who tell you that it cannot be done. There are thousands who prophesy failure. There are thousands who point out to you, one by one, the dangers that wait to assail you. But just buckle in with a bit of a grin. Just go take off your coat and go to it. Just start to sing as you tackle a thing that cannot be done, and you'll do it. Now, the other thing I'd like to, you noticed me, I kept going back and forth between male and female, because the poem was actually written with he. Somebody said he couldn't be done, that kind of thing. But it changed the
pronoun to she.
Pronoun to she.
Yeah.
And it is applicable to women as well as to men.
Well, Lenzy, you've always been a pioneer and a thinker and a doer, and you're a good friend. I think you're my oldest friend. And happy 90th birthday to you this month.
Hey, well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And you had a birthday too, back in when?
In December, yeah. I'm next December I'll be 70. We've been 20 years apart, and we probably continue to be.
Yeah. Hey, well, listen. Thank you very much for letting me have an opportunity to talk on your show, and to hopefully people, if they're interested, they can contact me, as we pointed out a couple of times, lenzybook.com and lenzybook at gmail.com.
Yeah. LENZYBOOK at gmail.com for the book
correct.
No to On by Dr. Lenzy Wallace. Lenzy, thanks so much for being on the radio with me today. It's been great talking to you, and I hope to see you soon.
Oh, likewise to you. Okay? Thank you very much.
You bet. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Folks, you've been listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I had my guest on, Lenzy Wallace, a good friend, an old friend, a colleague, and a friend for a long time. And you're listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. This is an interesting show. I'm going to have Andrew come on now, and I guess when Andrew comes on, I'm going to see if we can, how the mic has to work so that we can introduce Andrew, and he can talk a little bit about his show that's coming up in the next, in 2 weeks. It's going to be the fourth Wednesdays of the month, and it's going to be serving another part of our community. Or we actually serve everybody with this show, and he's going to target a particular segment of the community that isn't always served. There you go.
Good. So I wanted to thank Chuck for his kind graciousness, because our new show will be called the LGBT Community Show, and it'll be on the Community Radio Hour 12 to 1 every week. But Chuck had one of these hours, and he graciously gave it to me and Steve for putting in some community outreach to the LGBT community, not only like in Norwalk where I'm from, but also toward Hartford and New Haven and the North Fork of Long Island, but also worldwide with the streaming at WPKN.org.
Now, you told me a little bit, Andrew, about the format for the show. You want to talk a little bit about what you have in mind and how your 1 hour, the fourth Wednesday of each month, is going to work?
Yes, I'm a volunteer at Triangle Community Center. That's in Norwalk, Connecticut, and that's the main LGBT center for Fairfield County. So I'm a volunteer and a fundraiser and a member over there. So what that is like a triumvirate. It's not just Triangle, which reaches out to the LGBT community. It's a group of doctors called World Health Clinicians, Circle Care Center, and Circle Care Pharmacy. And they're a nonprofit doctor's office who takes care of anybody who has medical issues in the entire community. And then the other part of the triumvirate is Mid-Fairfield AIDS Practice. They're all under one office, and it's over there on West Avenue in Norwalk. So I'm going to try to give 15 minutes to the leadership of each of these programs, World Health Clinicians, Triangle Community Center, and Mid-Fairfield. And then we'll have some music, and we'll have some current events and things like this. I haven't decided on call-ins yet because I want to just kind of keep it toward the leadership in the community, but we'll evolve as the show evolves.
So for people that aren't part of that community and don't know much about it, what are some of the things that they might learn, so that would they be interested in tuning in as well?
What's happening is there's a lot of discrimination in the world against LGBT people. So if you've had problem with a job, maybe you've been fired or something, or someone treated you bad or called you a bad name because you're gay or lesbian, I have a resource for you to go in the state of Connecticut to find either attorneys that can help you or state organizations that can help you. And if it needs to go as far as filing a discrimination case, I can help you with that as well. Also, I can help you if you want to put some legislation in front of the state legislator, how to write a position paper in terms of how to convince legislators of this bill or that bill is good for you or the community that you represent.
So that would be for the people that are part of the community. And I guess, because we have a very progressive audience and we have people that care quite a bit about other people and other people's needs, I guess it's kind of an education for everybody that isn't really part of that community.
Yes, and that's a big part of the show, too. It's called the Community LGBTQ Show, but it's for everybody. If you just want to know where to go to find a good social event or a good we have several Pride events coming up towards the summer. It's going to be Fairfield and the one in Norwalk, and they're going to be May, June, and things like this. But the entire community might want to say, well, I want to go to an event and just educate myself. And it's not just LGBTQ focused. Anybody in the entire community, the WPKN listeners, can benefit from the show.
So I don't know if, while I'm talking to Andrew, in case anybody has a question about the show, you could call in. We've got a couple more minutes left. The number to call, if you're interested, is 203-336-9756. So if you've got a question that you'd like Andrew to answer, 203-336-9756. So what gave you the idea for the show, Andrew? What caused you to think that this is something that you wanted to be doing and that you wanted to do it here at WPKN?
So for 3 years, I've been a volunteer at Triangle Community Center in Norwalk, and I've actually been a volunteer at WPKN as well. So what I did was got the idea to bring a WPKN tent down to the Pride Festival, and Steve, the GM, graciously donated a big tent, and we decorated it with all Pride colors, and we put out information on WPKN. So it's a mutual benefit. PKN gets more listeners, and then everybody over there knows, hey, we can talk about it on the radio and the WPKN Facebook page. I've been doing that for 3 Pride events now, and we're going to do another one. We have live entertainment at all these events, so I thought it'd be great. And then Steve, the GM, said, I'll green light that. I'm like, oh, wow, here's good, because it is community-based, and it's something that maybe people are afraid to take on. So I decided to do it because it'd be great for the community, and luckily the green lights have gone on from there, and especially with Chuck. All gratitude to Chuck.
Well, I thank you very much. I'm not sure I had much of a role in it, but I'm glad to be able to help you introduce it, and I wish you much success with it. And I'll be listening and just to see how you do on your first show coming up. It's just in 2 weeks, right?
Oh, yes, exactly. And I've been very happy to do it. I've always loved radio as a kid growing up. I've always loved radio, and I always loved the interaction. Now with Facebook, radio becomes like a worldwide audience. It's not just, some guy on the radio. It's actually much more interactive, and it's actually a great way to reach people through all the different social medias that's out there. When you combine radio with it, the interactiveness allows us to reach a lot of people and help them in their daily lives.
Okay, Andrew, anything else you'd like to say, or are we good? Or
I'm good, thanks. I don't want to take up too much of your time. We are, it's going to be faith-based and family values show, so we do a lot of work with the churches like St. Paul's on the Green in Norwalk, and if anybody this is Holy Week right here, so there's a lot of events going on at churches around the area and synagogues, so if you have any information on services, you can post it to the WPKN page, and everybody would be happy to know what's happening in your community.
Okay, Andrew, thank you very much for being on, and I wish you much success with your show. All right, folks, I'm going to talk just for a moment about my next show. I'm going to be talking about the use of emotion, and the use of emotion is this idea that you can plan what you want to feel. Think about what we heard Lenzy Wallace talk about his growing up years and being told at one time that you people can't learn a language. How defeating is that? But he turned that around because another person intervened and made a huge difference in his life by introducing him to that poem. And that poem was all about being able to turn no into on, turn no around. So if you've got something going on in your life and you're looking to try and turn it around, then think about that poem. Think about changing your emotions. The use of emotion is this idea that certain emotions are better than other emotions, but creating the kind of feeling that's going to be best suited for what you're trying to get done. And I'm going to spend the show talking about this idea of what emotions work best with different situations. So if you're trying to address someone who has got a bad attitude in your workplace and you're a leader, what do you want to feel going into that conversation, and what do you want them to feel? What do you want to feel at the beginning of the conversation, the middle of the conversation, and at the end of the conversation? And the same for them. What do you want them to feel at the beginning, the middle, at the end? What if you've got somebody that's really struggling with self-concept or self-esteem issues, and you want to help them to feel better about themselves? What feeling do you want to induce in them? What do you have to feel in order to help create that feeling in them? How do you model what you want them to feel? So these are the kind of things that I'm looking forward to talking about the next time we're on together. This is Chuck Wolf. You've been listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Take the wheel and control how you feel. Exciting, right? The concept itself is exciting. You can control how you feel. That's all about the use of emotion, folks. So I'm going to close out my show by saying thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you're a new listener, the show is The Emotion Roadmap by Chuck Wolf, and the tagline is Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. And we're on the first and second Wednesdays of the month. And on the fourth Wednesday, you're going to be listening to Andrew talk about the LGBT community. And I hope you tune in for all our shows, because there's nothing better than WPKN. You're listening to PKN, 89.5 FM Bridgeport, serving Fairfield, New Haven, and Litchfield counties in Connecticut and Suffolk County in New York, as well as communities around the world via podcast and streaming at WPKN.org. If you'd like to hear more of my shows, you can find the Emotion Roadmap with Chuck Wolf by going to WPKN.org, clicking on podcast, clicking on SoundCloud, and typing in the Emotion Roadmap with Chuck Wolf, and you'll find lots of my archive shows. You can find them there and on Public Radio Exchange. Thanks, everybody. Have a great couple of weeks.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.